22. 2 weeks went by, with life going on in a pleasantly monotonous way for Vicky and me. There was quite a bit of rain, which pleased the boys, even though it meant they had to work in rubber boots and slickers most of the time. The rain assured them of a good supply of water in the flumes they had built during the months they could not wash gravel. They had started washing gravel about the 1st of December, that being the date when the legal ban against this phase of placer mining was lifted. Now they worked every hour they could, hoping to have a good cleanup on the 1st of February. The rain brought the sound of the river from a murmur to a low, continuous roar. Then for a day and a night snow fell, thick and soft, turning our world to one in which no green showed, everything being different shades of white. The Siskiyou News said that the snowfall was much heavier on the upper reaches of the river in Oregon than it was in our part of the country. I thought that was good, since it meant more water would sink into the ground to replenish springs as the snow slowly melted, but the boys did not share my optimistic outlook. They just shook their heads without bothering to explain and hurried off to the mine, regardless of the snow that covered the ground. A few days later, I woke up one morning and sensed at once that the river had a deeper note than before. Mixed with that, I heard another sound. Gentle rain on the roof a few feet above my head. That meant the weather had turned warmer, and I was glad. I never did like severe cold. The rain would soon melt the snow, and my mountain world would be green again. A little while later, the boys came into my kitchen, their slickers dripping. "Here's your mail," Dear Sir said, pulling the Siskiyou News and the 2 circulars from an inside pocket. "There's some news in the paper that might interest you." I spread it on the table. A big black headline stared up at me. Flood warning. Quickly, I read the paragraph below. It stated that two unprecedentedly, quickly, I read the paragraph below. It stated that 2 unprecedentedly heavy cloudbursts had occurred the day before on the Upper Klamath. The deluge of rain had melted millions of tons of snow. The result was an alarming rise in the river. The crest of the flood had not yet reached Siskiyou County, and its height could not be forecast at the present time. I looked at the boys. Their faces were grave. What will happen?" I asked. "There's no telling," Dear Sir said. "The river is 3 feet higher this morning than it was last night. Bent pine, well, you know those 4 crooked pine trees? Their trunks are bent about 4 feet above the ground, maybe 10 feet higher than the river is now. That'll give you an idea. If the river rose that much once, it can do it again." "If it does, it will sweep away the cabin." "Yep," Up and Up said. "But, dear madam, the river's nowhere near that high now. We ain't going to worry until we have to." "Up and Up's right," Dear Sir broke in. "He and I are going up to the mine now, but we'll be down about noon to see how things are. Now don't you worry. Probably nothing at all will happen. You're safe, regardless of what kind of tantrum the river has. Your cabin is at least 100 feet above the highest water mark the old Klamath ever left." They strode off through the rain, which had lessened to a mere drizzle, leaving me restless, oppressed with the dread of what might happen to Bent Pine. How could those boys have gone off up the mountainside? Pete and the nannies, they were free and had sense enough to take care of themselves. But those fool chickens, of course their fence yard was well back from the river, but closer to it than the cabin. But, I reminded myself, there was nothing I could do. They would go berserk with fear if I so much as approached them, and the boys surely knew what they were doing. They'd lived for years in this country. The rain stopped. The skies cleared to a beautiful blue. From my first terrace, I looked down on the tossing, muddy river. Here it roars as it surged by, angry and threatening, overwhelming in its power. Shivering, I went inside and waited for the boys to come back. At 11, I put on my high rubber boots, laid my woolly coat and a yellow slicker on the bed. I was going to Bent Pine with them, and nothing they could say was going to stop me. When they did come, we had quite an argument, but in the end I went along. When we reached Bent Pine, we walked down the roadway and past the tool house before we could see how high the river had risen. Dirty water swirled where the garden had been. its frothy waves gnawing at the foot of the first of the 4 crooked pine trees. Part of the chicken yard was under water. The hens huddled in the mud next to their house, clucking in mad terror. The little orchard had not as yet been touched by the rising flood, and the cabin and tool house looked safe, at least for a time. Dear Sir found a 4-foot-long stick and pushed it into the ground at the edge of the water, then cut a notch at the water level with his pocket knife. "We'll use this as a gauge," he said, "to tell whether the water is rising or falling. Let's go into the cabin, get warm, and have something to eat. The chickens are in no danger for a while." Up and Up heated beans, made coffee. Dear Sir set the table. We ate in silence, except for the ominous roar of the river so close to us. It was a dreadful sound, and I was unable to get the sight of the wild, tossing flood out of my mind. Finally, we rose from the table and went to look at Dear Sir's improvised gauge. The notch was hidden by brown water. Dear Sir pulled up the stick, looked at it carefully. "There's been a 4-inch rise while we were eating," he said. "We better take care of those chickens Up and Up." He set up the gauge again. Then the boys caught the bedraggled and terrified hens by their feet and carried them 6 at a time to the goat's barn across the road and a little way up the mountainside, shutting them inside. The poor squawking things. With so little brain, it is hard to know how they could become so frightened. We went back into the cabin and waited. At intervals, one or the other of the boys went out and examined the gauge. Hour by hour, the water rose until the ground where the fruit trees grew was covered to the depth of 6 inches. So strong was the current of the river that even the shallow water swirled and frothed, advancing and retreating, leaving edges of yellow foam that were carried away by the next surge. It was as if the river reached out in a ravening anger, obsessed by the passion to destroy everything it could reach. We were too oppressed by the sense of danger to read, so we talked idly of this and that, trying to forget the threat of the river. There was a man, a stranger, name of Bill Shaw, at Happy Camp the last time I was there, Dear Sir said. Got to talking to him. He and his partner have located a placer claim on the other side of the river, about a mile below Fuchsia Point. "Across the river!" exploded Up and Up. "Now there's a bright pair. How are they going to get stuff across? You can't do much with a boat, even when it's safe to use one, which isn't often. They aim to build a suspension bridge, like the one the Bennings have." "That'll cost 'em some money," Up and Up observed. "Sure it will," said Dear Sir. "But from the way Shaw talked, they didn't mind that. He thinks they have a rich claim over there. What started me thinking about him, this flood will delay them for a while. They aren't going to like that. There's only about 5 months left for them to wash gravel before summer comes, and it will take them a while to get set up for it." "How do you plan to get the first cable across the river?" I asked. "He has a powerboat he intends to use," he told me, "but now it isn't going to be safe to do that for a while. Sometimes it takes the old river quite a spell to settle down after one of these rampages." "I'm glad it's him and not me that's going to work across the river," Up and Up said. "The whole idea is crazy, if you ask me. I hope he ain't going to ask us to help him get that cable across." Dear Sir looked uncomfortable. "Probably he will," he said. "I think he kind of got the impression that I said we would. I don't know how." Up and Up gave Dear Sir a disgusted look. "Knowing you, I bet I know how he got that impression. You gave it to him. You're the original fall guy for every feller in the Siskiyous that tells you he needs help. Oh, well, I guess it won't hurt us to lend him and his partner a hand." "It'll likely be sometime in the future," Dear Sir said, and got up to look at his gauge again. We went with him, stood at the edge of the water, now only a few feet from the cabin, feeling the power of the river in my very bones. The Klamath, even in the summer, is never a peaceful, pretty stream, as are so many of the small rivers and creeks flowing into it. Always it is a river of rugged, austere beauty, traveling tumultuously toward the sea. In flood, as it was now, its power overshadowed every other characteristic, and I looked at it, appalled. It could so easily sweep away the home of my 2 friends, as if it were no more than a frail matchbox. But we were spared that calamity. At 4 o'clock, the flood reached its crest, paused there a while, and then began to subside. By dark, it had gone down a foot, and we went into the cabin for supper. That over, the boys took me home. But won't you be afraid to go to sleep? I asked them as we said good night. The water might rise again. I'll keep watch until midnight, dear sir answered. Then Up and Up can take over, but I hardly think there is any danger. I went to bed and quickly fell asleep in spite of the roaring of the river in the canyon below me. The river went down almost as fast as it had ridden. The river went down almost as fast as it had risen, but not to its old level. The water stayed high and rough, the current swift and treacherous. One morning, the boys stopped by to tell me they were on their way down the river to help Jim Shaw and his partner get their first cable across the river in preparation for building the suspension footbridge. I don't think we'll be gone long, though, dear sir said. In my opinion, it isn't safe to take a boat out on the river yet, not even a powerful one such as Jim Shaw's, though the water at that point flows more smoothly than most places. The swirling currents are completely unpredictable and highly dangerous. We told Jim we'd be down, so we gotta go, Up and Up said, but it's a wild goose chase. We knew you'd hear the jalopy go by, so we thought we'd better tell you where we were headed for. Thank you, boys, I said. Now you be sure you don't let this Jim Shaw persuade you to do anything foolish. Ha! Was Up and Up's comment. Don't you worry, dear madam. We're not going to risk our necks out in no boat with the Klamath kicking up like it is. We're just going to help Jim and his partner get the cable out of the truck and fixed so as it'll unwind off the reel without no hitch. Him and his partner aim to handle the boat. The cable is heavy, dear sir said. I'm not sure we can lift the reel out of the truck and get it down to the edge of the river. We'll stop and get Frenchie to go along. He can lift more than any other three men I know. Maybe he won't go, I ventured, not liking any part of this. Of course he will, dear sir answered a little impatiently. Frenchie's always glad to lend a hand to anybody, and you know how proud he is of his strength. He's like a kid wanting to show it off. Well, we better be on our way. Please stop on your way back, I said. I want to know how you make out. Sure will, dear madam, Up and Up promised. A few minutes afterward, the jalopy went chugging off down the road. It was almost 2 hours later when I heard the boys' footsteps coming up my trail. I hurried to the door, threw it open. Hello, I called. How did... The sight of their faces stopped me. I knew something dreadful had happened. But what? They were both here, apparently safe and sound. Wordlessly, they came in and sat down. I sank into my wicker rocking chair, knees weak with dread. What is it? I asked. Up and Up looked appealingly at dear sir. Frenchie's dead, dear sir said. No! How? What? My mouth felt dry and I clutched the arms of my chair, leaning forward. Drowned, he said. I can't believe it myself yet, but I saw him. He stopped as if unable to continue. Up and Up, tell me. But Up and Up, his face buried in his hands, was beyond speech. It was like this, dear sir began with an effort. We all agreed, after one look at the river, that it would be suicide to try crossing in a boat. Jim and his partner were very much upset by the delay in their plans. Delay was serious, of course. They haven't much time to work their claims before the 1st of July. However, they gave up the whole idea of getting the cable across the river until the river went down more. Then Frenchie spoke up. He ordered us to tie one end of a carpenter's chalk line to the cable. He would, he declared, take the other end of the chalk line in his hand, swim with it to the opposite bank of the river, haul the cable across and fasten it to the big fir tree there. That would solve the problem. He was absolutely sure he could do it. And you men let him, I cried. We couldn't stop him. You know how Frenchie is. The more we opposed him, the more stubborn he acted. He got the idea we thought he wasn't strong enough to do it, which of course the truth, and he made up his mind he'd show us. Why, he even refused to tie the chalk line to the cable, so he did it himself. Then he took off his shoes, grabbed the cord, and walked into the river. 10 feet from the bank, the current grabbed him, swept him downstream fast. But he kept making some headway toward the opposite shore. About 2/3 of the way across, the river swirled around a big rock. Between it and the farther bank of the river, though racing along, it was comparatively smooth. Frenchie reached this rock, pulled himself out of the water, stood up. He grinned at us, raised the fist with the cord, grasped it, and waved, and yelled something we couldn't hear what. Then suddenly he pitched backwards. The lashing, boiling currents took around the rock, sucked him under in an instant. We never saw him again. But what do you suppose happened? Dear madam, we'll never know. His foot may have slipped on the rock. His heart may have failed because of the terrific exertion of battling the currents of the river. But when an autopsy... We hunted for miles down the river, Up and Up said. No sight of him. The body of anyone who drowns in the Klamath is almost never found, Dear Sir said. With water as high as it is now, I think there's no chance we will ever see Frenchie again. Dear Sir was right. The river had claimed him forever. Though Frenchie had kept himself apart and aloof from everyone, he had always been kind and generous. The folks up and down the Klamath missed him, missed the sight of his great figure striding by on the road, the sound of his booming laughter. His cabin, which could be seen clearly from the road, soon looked untenanted. The railing of the tiny ramshackle bridge he used to cross the little stream broke, and no one repaired it. This weather-beaten cabin and the flimsy, dilapidated bridge constituted the only monument Frenchie had to remind people that he had ever lived.